Welcome back. Well, I am delighted to welcome one of our most favorite people, and that's Laurie Cardoza-Moore. She's the founder and the president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and always a joy to have her on. And we want to talk about the late Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. But before I do, Laurie, good to see you. What are you guys doing at the NRB? Because we're going to be there, and I want to catch up with you.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear that, because you have to come to our premiere of our documentary, Israel Indivisible, The Case for the Ancient Homeland.
Okay.
So you are planning to be there. Are you there the whole time during the whole convention?
Yep.
And you're going to have a place on the floor?
Probably not. You mean on the exhibit floor?
Yes.
No, probably not. But I will be there roaming the restaurants.
Okay. Well, stop by our booth, too. Booth number 622, because we'll have a place at the convention also. You can see some of our latest programs that we'll have as well.
Okay. I will definitely do that. Well, this past week, pardon me?
I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you Michael Medved is coming. He's going to be our keynote speaker. So we're going to premiere the documentary, and then he's going to come and speak to the group. And then we're going to honor one of our colleagues at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention with Sun Broadcasting, Annette Garcia.
Oh.
I don't know if you've had the chance to meet her, but she's a great advocate for Israel.
Wow. Well, we are receiving a fairly significant award there. And I can't announce it yet, but you can go take a look and see what it is.
Oh. Well, then I'm going to have to make plans to be there, too.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Hey, listen, this past week, we watched the funeral and, of course, all of the various eulogies and recognitions of the late Ariel Sharon, Prime Minister. And pretty interesting guy. You know, mixed reviews on his legacy. But give us your thoughts on him.
Well, let me tell you, he was an extremely interesting man. I mean, this man is credited for establishing the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces as we know it. He was a huge advocate of the settlement movement. He protected the settlers. He did not believe in giving up the land. He was critical. He was very focused on eliminating the issue of terrorism, not giving up anything for the terrorist activity. Unfortunately, as we all know, it was under Ariel Sharon's leadership that the disengagement happened in Gush Katif in Gaza. And of course, that unfortunate event in history will always remain with his legacy. And the many great things that he did as a leader were just blotted out with that whole event. And it was a very sad and very tragic event. There are still people, Israelis, who are having to live under the fallout, who are still not, have not received their permanent housing since that event, which has been very tragic. Mm-hmm. And of course, as a result of it, Israel has received thousands of missiles from Gaza, even right after the ink wasn't even dry on the paper.
Right.
And there were missiles being lobbed. And in fact, over the last 24 hours, there were, again, 5 more missiles launched from Gaza. There was another attempted terrorist hijacking. So it's a very sad thing. You know, I think with what is happening with Israel now, I think Israelis are sobering up to the fact that this peace process may not ever come to fruition. Mm-hmm. And we were premiering the documentary Israel Indivisible back in November. We actually went and did a premiere focus group, if you will, with Israelis. We went to Ariel University, which is the university that Obama snubbed on his trip to Israel, because that university happens to reside in the illegitimate settlements, as according to Obama. And we received an incredible response from the Jewish community. And I think if you look at the polls coming out of Israel, I think people are becoming more disenfranchised with what's happening. Of course, they're disappointed with the leadership in Washington, D.C. Because of our policies, because we're not In fact, one of the members of Knesset in Israel a couple months ago said we're going to have to start looking for new allies, which was really a tragic thing.
Wow. So
unfortunately, coming out of this legacy that Ariel Sharon left behind, there's been, just tremendous damage. It hasn't gotten better. We know that it won't get better. In fact, it's interesting because there was a rabbi, Rabbi Kadori. Right. I don't know if you heard about this rabbi.
Yeah, we've interviewed the author of the book talking about his prophecy, not only Jesus being the Messiah, but that Christ wouldn't return until after Sharon passed away.
Correct. He had a vision. He said, he wrote down that the Messiah would reveal himself to Israel shortly after Sharon passed away. So that was a huge thing. It's a huge marker. Of course, we know this year we're looking at back-to-back 2 years of the blood red tetrad moons appearing, which is another major prophetic event, which the prophet Joel talked about. And of course, these blood red moon occurrences they're actually lunar eclipses, but they're called blood red moon tetrads by NASA. And these appearances are going to be happening on 2 of the feast days this year and next year. And this has not happened and will not happen. In fact, Pastor Mark Biltz will be at the NRB as well. He's going to be speaking after our event. He's going to talk about the book that he's writing with WND. And I do believe that they're going to have the video there. They produced a documentary about this occurrence, this phenomenon. So you have all of these events prophetically happening right now in our lifetime. And I'm telling you, Perry, it's an incredible time to be alive. There's just tremendous tragedy going on around the world. We see the rise of anti-Semitism happening. We see the rise of Christian persecution. In fact, I read a report that in 2013, 100 million Christians have been murdered in 1 year. That's profound. In all of in the world, and particularly in the Middle East, where we're seeing what's happened, the slaughter of Christians in Syria, in Tunisia, in Libya, right. In Iraq. We're seeing it, erupt again in Pakistan. It's a tremendous tragedy.
I see where Christians are being persecuted in 37 Muslim countries right now.
Yeah,
that's horrific.
And these are all countries that we have a relationship with to some degree. If we look at what happened with our involvement in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, in Syria, instead of things getting better for minority religions or Christians, it has only gotten worse. In fact, Egypt just passed or have been voting on their constitution, which actually states that they are going to protect Christians again. And unfortunately, the Obama administration has been holding out funding, and I do believe Congress is scheduled to vote on Friday to reapprove another $1.5 billion to the Egyptian government. But prior to that, the Obama administration was threatening the government of Egypt that if they didn't put the Muslim Brotherhood at the table, to give them a seat at the table of government, that we were going to withhold the funding. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Morsi government was a Muslim Brotherhood terrorist government. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, we're not supporting democracies around the world. We're supporting Muslim Brotherhood terrorists.
Secretary of State Kerry just recently, a couple of days ago, leaving Israel, was heavily criticized. In fact, they thought that one of the Jewish journalists thought that he had a kind of a messianic complex. He's since apologized, but our own Secretary of State doesn't get it. Certainly the president doesn't get it. I listened to the vice president's eulogy to Ariel Sharon, and it was just a mismatch of stuff. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's not surprising. we don't have an administration that values our Western allies anymore. I don't even think this administration values any of its relationships. They've turned their back on governments that we once stood with, like Egypt before, and now we're in secret negotiations with Iran,
right,
with Valerie Jarrett at the helm.
Right.
A Shiite nation where of course, Obama bowed to the Shiite king, and you have to wonder, what is he doing? I mean, does Kerry? It was Moshe Ya'alon who made the comment that Kerry has a messianic complex, and I think that this administration does. I mean, all those headlines around the world that called him the Messiah when he was running the first time, I think it all went to his head.
Now, the president has some ongoing initiatives to continue to divide the land there in Israel. And he admitted yesterday that with or without legislation, he's going to use the power of executive order to get what he wants. By the way, we had a report earlier, in the last 100 years of presidents, and that would be from FDR up through George W., those presidents totaled 121 executive orders. The president, Obama, in the first 3.5 years of his administration, has used over 900 executive orders. So he's obviously governing through executive orders, which a whole nother issue, that's abuse of powers. But how would that relate to continuing to try to divide the land in Israel?
Well, coming in April, Kerry has already told the Israeli government and the Palestinian leader they want a signed deal by April. Of course, who knows what we're going to get by that time. I find it interesting, that our documentary film is coming out at this time when this issue is becoming front and center. The Israelis, that we have to remember as Christians, that land belongs to the Jewish people. God gave it to them. He made a covenant with Abraham, and the land is part of the covenant. And this bears repeating often, is that when God made that covenant, he said, I'm going to make this covenant, Abraham, with you and your descendants after you. I'm going to make you like the stars of the heavens and the sands on the seashore, and I'm going to be your God to you and your descendants after you, and all the land you see, I'm giving it to you and your descendants after you. Right. So clearly right there, the land is God's land. It's his choice. He created the universe. He can decide whose borders, and the scriptures declare that God establishes the borders of the nations. And he definitely decided what the borders of the nation of Israel would be. As Christians, it's our responsibility to uphold that covenant and that truth. And so, Perry, we are coming on an election year, and I hope that your listeners are paying attention to what's happening and looking for leaders who are going to take a stand. Because if we as a nation choose to divide the land of Israel, like God told the prophet Joel in the last days, God said he was going to wipe out the nations of the world because they were dividing up his land. This is critical.
Yeah. Let me take a quick break here, Laurie, and I want to come back to that. And I also want you to go ahead and give us a little bit of an insight of Israel Indivisible, and which will be debuting coming up at the NRB, and some of the lies that documentary exposes. We'll be right back with Laurie Cardoza-Moore in just a moment. Okay, we're back, and our special guest, and just delighted, I always have Laurie Cardoza-Moore with us. She's the founder and the president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I want to talk to her about the documentary film that they'll be premiering at the NRB coming up in February, Israel Indivisible. And this is an incredible thing, and congratulations, Laurie. I know that this has been a long road, and but so exciting. What day are you debuting it there at the NRB?
It's going to be Sunday evening from 7 to 9 p.m.
All right.
So we'd love to, I'll certainly add your name to the VIP list so you can be there to join us and to celebrate. But the film, Perry, it's as I said before we went to break, it's such a critically important film right now, because in this film, it's Israel Indivisible, the case for the ancient homeland. And in the film, we expose the historical, the archaeological, the legal, and the biblical evidence to prove Israel's rights to the land. This is such an important issue, as I said, because the world leaders are now pushing Israel to divide, to go back. The Obama administration's policies are to force them back to pre-67 borders. To the Palestinians want right of return. They want all the ancestors of the Palestinians or Arabs who left, who were told to leave by their Arab leaders, so that once they eliminated the Jews in the 48 war, when the War of Independence, then they could come in and they could take the whole land. So they want them to have the right of return, to come back into the land. That land was given to a specific people. And we as Christians, that is where our faith was birthed. And we, because the Jews, because Jacob is our brother, and God talked about this. You know, there's a great scripture in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 28, I think it is, or 32, where Moses is preparing the Israelites to go in and take the land. They're on the east side of the Jordan, and the leaders of Reuben and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh asked if they could stay on the east side of the Jordan, that the land was lush and green. They had lots of flocks, so they wanted to keep them on the east side. And Moses chastised them. He said, will you discourage your brethren by not crossing this Jordan and help them to obtain their territory? Perry, we as Christians cannot sit over here on the western side of the Atlantic while our Jewish brethren are fighting to even keep the little sliver of property that they have, and say it's not my problem or it's not my issue.
Right.
That's a Jewish issue. That's Israel's issue. No, it is our issue, because even Paul said in Galatians 3:29, if you're in Christ, you're Abraham's seed. He told the believers in Ephesus that you were once outside of the commonwealth of Israel. He didn't say you were outside of the commonwealth of the church. He said you're outside of the commonwealth of Israel. So it was because of Jesus' shed blood that you've been brought into the commonwealth of Israel. That nation and that land is part of our inheritance. It's our responsibility, and we can't let our Jewish brethren have to fight and defend that land on their own. The United States is a Judeo-Christian nation. It's the largest Christian nation in the world, we hope.
Yeah, we hope. I think our own future is directly linked. Our own future and our freedom is directly linked to our support of Israel. That's my personal conviction. But even the current boundary of Israel is only about a third of what the Bible describes.
That's right. You know, it's interesting because I was watching Fox News last week, and Catherine Herridge was being interviewed, and behind her on the screen was a global backdrop. Right. And you could see the outline of the original Israel that was given in biblical times. And I said to my husband, I said, you're never going to believe this. Now, there was a line that went through to show the border of Israel, but it looked like the shape of what Israel was biblically given. And I thought, do they know what they were doing? Because prophetically, that's part of Israel's property. But it is, Perry, it's so important that we as Christians understand this truth. And of course, the documentary is produced for a Christian audience. But what's so amazing is that our Jewish brethren support us in this, because the Orthodox and the more conservative leaning of the Jewish community agrees with our position. But we have Christian leaders like Bill and Lynn Hybels, like Tony Campolo, Rick Warren, who agree with the Palestinian narrative, who have fallen for this lie and accuse Israel of occupying Palestinian land. And Christians, the reason why we produced the film was to educate Christians and then give them an action item to make phone calls, to contact their congressmen and senators. And of course, I was in Washington, D.C. back in September and met with Senator Corker and his staff, his foreign relations staff. He is a ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He happens to represent the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, too, Tennessee. And so I met with his chief of staff and asked him, what is the ranking member doing? We have an administration who is not only destabilizing the region to the point that Christians are being slaughtered, but now Israel doesn't even know, when the next missile strike is going to come, because the whole region has been so destabilized. I mean, you can see the end time scenario playing out, the Psalm 83 war.
Laurie, why is that land so controversial? What makes it so controversial?
I believe it's because God gave that land to the descendants of Isaac. And the descendants of Ishmael, there's been such a struggle between the two. Because Ishmael, and if we remember, we go back to Genesis, Ishmael was given the land east of where Israel is. That was their territory. But they want it all. And I believe that, of course, in our lifetime, because we are living in the last days, the reason why that land is so important is because the enemy, Satan, does not want Israel to regain that land. Because if they take back the territory that was given to them, and if God regathers all Israel, then the enemy's time is up.
One other question. Do you think there is a rise of anti-Semitism even within the Christian community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I stated earlier, it's being fueled by leaders like the Hybels, like Tony Campolo. I spoke with a pastor from Dallas last week who told me about Gateway Church, which is one of the biggest churches in Dallas Metroplex, is inviting these pro-Palestinian propagandists to come and speak in their churches. And these are pastors. These are supposed Christian leaders. But because of replacement theology, they do not believe that the Israel of the Bible is the Israel that is sitting there today, that this is God's working out of time. And unfortunately, because of that, we have Christians who are antagonistic toward the Jews and have bought the narrative. But that's why, Perry, we can't go based on what's politically expedient. We can't base our beliefs on what some government's policies are. We have to base our beliefs on the Word of God. And it's the scriptures that are going to become more and more crucial in the days to come. Because there's only one truth. And unfortunately, that truth is not being communicated in our pulpits or from our pulpits. And a lot of pastors won't communicate that truth because it doesn't fit with what they've been taught, and because they say it's not part of their calling, that Israel is not their calling.
Once the documentary is debuted and it's out, where do you want it to go? How do you want it to be viewed? How do you want to get it out there?
Our goal is to take it globally. In fact, last year we spoke with God TV. We showed the trailer of the film last year at the NRB, and the representative, Jeffrey Levinson from God TV, came up to me immediately. The trailer wasn't even finished. That's how compelling it is. And your viewers can actually go to, or your listeners can go to our website at pjtn.org, and they can actually watch the trailer. But the trailer was so compelling that he leapt out of his seat and he said, we have to have that. We want to be the first. So we're going to be talking with God TV about airing it, being the first network to air it around the globe. Of course, God TV is in over 210 countries around the world. And that's our mission, is to take that message around the globe, translate the film into different languages. In fact, I'm working with a gentleman in Sweden right now who is taking all of our Focus on Israel programs, and he's beginning the process of translating them into different languages. The Forgotten People, Christianity and the Holocaust is just now in its final edits. We translated that into Spanish. That will be broadcast into Spain and into South America. Because what's interesting,
I got to scoot, Laurie. I got to scoot. Let me tell you that. I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt you, but I want to put my hand up so we can get it on the Dove TV.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys do.
And I'll catch up with it at the NRB, but I want to get our hand up because I'd love to air it on our network too.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Laurie. God bless you, my friend. See you later. Okay, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.